If you really today look at 20% of design engineers for just the global semiconductor economy come from India.
Innovation is not just about going new geometry or increasing the power performance. It's about very smart integration for the total cost of ownership. And to do that, we need to put investment on the fundamental research of materials, devices, architecture, the integration method, and all of that. That's what many of us are doing internally, but I think we as an India has to do it together as well to ensure that some of these technologies and innovations are driven from India for the world.
Welcome to GCC Giants. In this session, we will be discussing design to deployment, scaling semiconductor innovation from India. With global demand for semiconductors at an all-time high, India's role is expanding, not as a manufacturer yet, but as a powerhouse of design, R&D, and global engineering services. To discuss this, we have with us two experts in the studio today. I'm joined by Jitendra Chaddha, MD and India Country Head at GlobalFoundries, and Navin Bishnoi, AVP, Data Center Engineering and India Country Manager at Marvell. A very warm welcome to the two of you. Thank you so much for joining us here at our studios. Now, the first question, and I'm sure you've been asked this before, the semiconductor industry is essential now to everything from smartphones to data centers to AI. How is India's role expanding in this semiconductor ecosystem? I'll start off with you, Navin, because of proximity.
Sure, yeah. So I think if you see even from an India perspective, there are two big infrastructure growth that we are seeing. One, the physical infrastructure, and then the digital infrastructure. And that's the digital infrastructure is the backbone of all that we are talking about. We used to call data as the new oil, and now we are talking about semiconductor or chips as the new oil. And primarily being because everything digital that we are trying to do is built on the foundation of semiconductor. Whether we moved on to the 5G, whether we are implementing AI, whether we are moving to a self-driven car, or whether we are talking about any new technology that we imbibe, semiconductor is the building or the foundational block. And good thing about India is that we have been doing this for many decades. Started with design, and we have matured significantly there, but we have gone to the every phase of the supply chain or the parts of the semiconductor, whether we are doing the key foundational blocks of IP and EDA tool generation, building the architecture and the design, sending it to the manufacturer house, and then get it back to get it to the productization and enabling it to the market. All of that we have been doing it here, and then now with the focus here, it's just going bigger in scale, and then the missing pieces are being put in as well.
All right, and the missing pieces being manufacturing, but we'll talk about that later. I'll come to you, Jitin. How do you see India's role evolving in the semiconductor hub of the world?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. In a very significant way, if you really look at India's role in the last at least 10 years and going forward, what I see, it is changing dramatically from not only for India's advantage, but what we are doing for the global semiconductor industry. If you really today look at 20% of design engineers for just the global semiconductor economy come from India, which is very, very significant. Right? If you look at the consumption in the Indian economy, I think it is growing very, very fast from currently, I think 40-50 billion consumption to in the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to reach 100 billion in consumption. So India not only just doing the design, but it's going to be a big market or starting to become a very big market for the semiconductor industry. As my fellow panelists said, right, even what we are doing from the manufacturing perspective, we are trying to see that from the design to manufacturing or to the ecosystem development, we have all those parts that we have can enable from India in the coming years. And lot of investment, lot of development is happening in that space. So overall, if you really look at it, it's not just the India story, but whole global semiconductor ecosystem is served from the design perspective from India. The consumption is very large for the global ecosystem. The global partners are coming and taking advantage of that consumption. The local OEMs and fabless ecosystem is developing in India, and with all the stuff that is happening in the manufacturing space, I think it will add the overall ecosystem from the supply chain perspective. So that's the growth story for the last 4 5 years, and it's going to continue at least for 2 decades if I see it.
All right, so India is in a plum space right now, and that's good to know from you. Now, when we talk about scaling to deployment, that means there's a lot of cross functional collaboration as well. How do you see India providing end to end outcomes in semiconductors?
I think we have to be careful when we say end to end, because if you really look at today any industry for that matter, not just the semiconductor industry, it's a very collaborative environment that you have to work in. I think if you look at how many countries from design to the final product the semiconductor industry or the product has to go through, you will be amazed. It travels thousands of kilometers and multiple continents in the countries for the design to the production to happen, right? So it's a very collaborative effort, and I think India is well known for working across the world to make sure that we can provide, for example, our positives or our strengths from the talent perspective, from a lot of research that can happen in across multi-country environment, and so on and so forth. So I would say it's a very very collaborative effort, and some pieces of it, rather than doing small pieces, you can start to develop little bit of a capability centers. That's where we are doing in India, rather than doing one or two people job, doing little more larger jobs, so that you create more efficiencies, more productivity, and so on and so forth. But in general, I would say it's not about end to end. It's about putting a right piece from India, which can add value to the overall global economy.
Okay, so it's all about collaboration and not necessarily end to end. Would you agree with that, Naveen?
I'll put it in the other way,
Okay.
right? So when at least when I started my career, there was like you are either an electronics or electrical engineer or a computer science engineer. So you're doing one of those two, and then building the stack up. What's happening right now that we realize that in a semiconductor world, you need much more than just the electronics and computer engineering. You have the need of the chemical and mechanical when we go into the manufacturing other side of it. You need a lot of materials and health physics and other information. So it's starting to become a multidisciplinary. But how do I combine it? What we were doing is that we were going up the value chain to put up a vertical stack. We were known as a software powerhouse. We started doing hardware. We started integrating all of them together, starting to take it to manufacturing, which was outsourced. But when you get back, then you again do everything and you start creating this vertical stack within the within a geography. And that was the India's strength, that we could scale it at that level to create this vertical stack and reach to what we call as a closest map to end to end. Can somebody do everything end to end? I agree with JC that no. But can we reach close to it? Absolutely. That's the power that we have to go all the way up the stack from that. And then what we do is that we flip it and then we start saying is that now how do I do it? If I do it, let's say in a industrial, can I go and do it in automotive? Can I repeat that in data center, in a cloud, or in any other electronics or semiconductor? Yes, because there's a lot of reuse that's happening. So the collaboration goes across the use cases, but the integration is vertical. That's giving the scale and the power for us to go close to an end-to-end deployment from India.
Interesting. Put a full stack prototype in place that can be replicated elsewhere as well. Okay. That's an interesting perspective. JC, I'll come back to you now. We're talking about GlobalFoundries specifically. It sits at the intersection of cutting edge design and fabrication. How is your India organization propelling the innovation and engineering design globally?
Great question. If you look at GlobalFoundries, we are the most global foundry in the world in the semiconductor manufacturing business. We have our operations or our factories, foundries in US, in Germany, in Europe, and also in Singapore. So in that way, we are very very global. In India, we are the largest presence of any foundry in the world. So we have a very big set of talent pool that works out of India. 80% of that talent pool works, as you said, at a very high cutting edge technologies. We do in India work from process technology development to IP development to customer enablement, and very critical function which is fab operations. Supporting the fabs. From India, and in addition to that, like any other multinational company does, we also have enabling services from India. So we have almost every aspect of foundry business that is present is present in India with GlobalFoundries in India, and one of the biggest presence that we have. And we are growing very, very fast. In the last 3 years, we have almost grown 2.5x in India, and continuing to grow here. I think if you really look at what we provide, in addition to just doing what we do, for GlobalFoundries from India, we are also enabling the startups and the fabless ecosystem in the country, where we have a GF India Foundry program now, which helps the fabless companies to develop their chips in a faster manner by foundries like us. We are providing them the development kits. We are providing them the shuttles, what we call it as shuttles is a manufacturing, uh, ability for them to manufacture faster. So it's a combined mix of what we are doing for the world, for the global foundry economy, and also how we are enabling the local ecosystem in the country.
Coming from the media, I can't help but say you're helping these companies go from fabless to fabulous. That would be a great
That's a
headline.
good headline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So
Yeah.
GF is one of the companies who is doing from
Who's doing that?
fabless to
Fabulous to
fabulous.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jitendra, you've been in this industry for a long time. So I would love to know from you, what leadership practices do you think are best, especially when it comes to leading your specialized pool of engineers and align them to the global requirements?
I think some very, very basic things, right? It's nothing rocket science here. I think the number one, I would say, for any the leader who is leading a GCC in India, making sure that we are very, very aligned to our global the goals of the company, and how we are really making sure that we can accelerate some of the goals that the global company has. Um, I think for me, I think right now the charter for us is how we can provide the scale for global foundries. To be able to increase their revenues, increase their gross margins, and how some of the capabilities in India can help them do that. So that is number one job. The second is, it's all about talent that we have here. How do we make sure we can provide the right growth opportunities for our talent? We can provide the career aspirations some of our youngsters have today. How can we really provide them a great environment in which they can succeed, they can work and flourish, right? So those are very, very important. The third one, I would say, how the GCC leaders role is pivoting a little bit is, as I said, there is a lot of local opportunity as far as consumption or as far as market is concerned. How do we help our global enterprises to tap into that growing market? Because we are closest to that market, we understand that market the best, and how we can really help our global organization understand how we can tap and accelerate winning that market locally in India. So I would say those are the three: be aligned to the corporate, make sure you take care of the talent, and find new opportunities that provide, because of the environment that you are in.
That's very well encapsulated indeed. Now I'll shift focus to you, Naveen. Marvell powers the data economy through semiconductors. How is your India organization enabling breakthroughs when it comes to the data center and cloud scale technologies?
Sure. So if you understand that infrastructure, data infrastructure part of it, basically there are three things there. You have this data that's going through across the world. So you need to process the data, you need to move the data, and you need to store the data, right? And while you do that, you need to keep the data secure. And then that's what Marvell does across to bring out these products to ensure we create the infrastructure so that you and I can use all these modern technologies that we built. Now, to be able to do this, there are two focus areas that we need to do. How do I build the products that's needed in the market today? And that involves a lot of innovation to go into the advanced technology node, advanced packaging methods, advanced architectures, advanced IP. So there's a lot of advanced so-called as a star things required to create these advanced infrastructure or the data infrastructure that we do. Now, while we do that, we also realize that the market is moving so fast that when you build some of these products, you have to also keep an eye on what's needed tomorrow and day after tomorrow. Because every year, each one of us want to have a new phone or a new infrastructure so that we can do a better things with our gadgets or the infrastructure that we have. So we also focus on saying what is something that is needed tomorrow and day after tomorrow, and build that as part of my innovation as an IP that I can put it on the shelf and have it for my design or the product integration next year and the year after that. So I have to have a forecast of saying like what's that versus ensuring this I do it at fast at the highest quality and do it across the stack, whether from the technology data files to the design to the creating the software layer around that, and then finally stacking them and enabling it to the customers globally. So that's where is the innovation fun happening today versus a look into the future of plus two lookout.
Okay, so that answers my other question as well in part, but I would like you to focus a little bit on the innovation side of it. When it comes to design, we are leading, India's leading, but for us to become indispensable when it comes to innovation, what are the other steps that we need to take?
Yeah, so just so that you can relate the volume of innovation that we need to require. When we talk about any processor that we have in these big AI infrastructure or into this new data infrastructure, we are talking about 100 billion transistors. So it's like you can relate to 10 to the power plus 12.
I don't even know how many
Right,
zeros are
yes.
there.
But you also are talking about doing this in something called the 2 nanometer. So I am going into 10 to the power minus 9 scale geometry of a transistor or a shape that I'm laying out, right? Add to it, many of these consume 700, 800 watts of power. That's the, so-called, that's what our geysers or the other equipments take, right? And some of these costs no more in cents or few dollars or couple of $100. These have started going into a thousand or a $10,000. So now your optimization has to happen to take the scale of 10 to the power minus 9 to the 10 to the power 12 to manage as 800 watts, do it with something which does not cost $20,000, and if it costs, then do it right the first time. And so you need to bring in a lot of things to do it first time right, on time, and trying to optimize all these metrics. And hence we need what we call as a very multidisciplinary innovation that's happening. While we reduce power to ensure that we don't cross the thermal umbrella, we have to start looking at saying like, the power will be there, how do I cool it? So you started going into the liquid properties of saying what cooling agent that I use and all of that. Similarly, when you talk about saying I am adding more and more functionality, now there's a limit of what I can manufacture. So then I start doing what I call it as what we did in real estate. I started going stacking up and up. So the innovation is not just about going new geometry or increasing the power performance. It's about very smart integration for the total cost of ownership. And to do that, we need to put investment on the fundamental research of materials, devices, architecture, the integration method, and all of that. That's what many of us are doing internally, but I think we as an India has to do it together as well to ensure that some of these technologies and innovations are driven from India for the world.
All right, I'll take that across to you, Jitendra. What do you think will take for India to become a global superpower in semiconductors over the next decade?
I don't know about the superpower aspect of it, but I think if you really see, we already talked about the design. We are really contributing to the world semiconductor economy in a very significant manner, with 20% of the design coming from design engineers, doing designs from India. We are developing a very robust manufacturing ecosystem with the help of incentives that the government of India, state governments are, providing. With that manufacturing incentives, I think the ecosystem will automatically get developed to serve the manufacturing in the country. The consumption is growing, and some of that consumption will get served, locally, some, globally. So if you really look at it, I think we are on a very good path towards creating a very advanced semiconductor ecosystem in the country, right? Not only for our global needs, which is where we are going to be $100 billion semiconductor industry in next 5 to 6 years, but also for the world semiconductor economy. So we are already doing that now. What else can be done to accelerate this process? I think one of the things, or couple of things, I would say that we can do more is, I think we can create little bit more market access for all, for our fabless companies, for the OEMs, which are going to basically create solutions for the growing semiconductor economy in the country. So in addition to what we are doing for fabless companies like DLI program by government of India, or capex investments in the manufacturing space, I think we can do 8 or 10 infrastructure demand projects we can create at the country level, and all of our effort can go towards meeting the demand that we have in those areas. That will do two things: one, it will solve a lot of India's problems, and it will provide provide the opportunity for these OEMs and fabless companies and manufacturing companies to serve that space. And second, then you don't have to then be competing with the big, global players. So you can, start with here. The second, I think this is a, time consuming. It takes decades to build this ecosystem, and it's very welcome what government of India is already doing, from capex, providing capex investment, to DLI in fabless and so on. In addition, I think we can provide some kind of a fund at national, state levels. Those funds can be used, to create and boost up the ecosystem. So I think those two things, providing a 10 infrastructure projects, 10 is just a number, but 5 to 10 infrastructure projects, providing a fund that can be targeted towards meeting the needs of those infrastructure projects.
Super. We asked you to chart out that roadmap to success, and you really did a great job there. Thank you for that, Jitendra. I'd also like to take in a word from you, Navin. Would you like to add something to that?
Sure, and I'll take two perspective on it. One from, like, when I represent Marvell, right? Most of the companies like Marvell, and Marvell included, the first few decades was about competency, and that's why I'm bringing 3 C's. We came here because there were a lot of competencies that was available in India. So tap into those talent and competency and build an R&D so that we can make the product for the world. Slowly what's happening, like JC highlighted, that we started becoming the consumer for the world, and hence we started making a lot of things from here to supply to that. And again, there is a lot of interest from the global companies, but that's where there's a lot of push saying, how do we create the Indian companies to create that? But the third one, which will take us to the next decade, the way you asked, is about how do we go to be a creator, create the IPs, create the products, create the technologies, and serve probably for the use case of India and then globally. And I think that's the path we are in to drive the next decade. Now, but I would extend it to saying, like, let's say an ecosystem, as a set of companies, we also need to come together and then formulate. So we work with a association called India Electronics and Semiconductor Association, called as IESA, where we all come together and also says that what are the right policies, what are the right supports, and what is the right ecosystem that we create so that this decade drives this innovation and the value creation from India. And that's where we are trying to do the policy upgrade, like what JC talked about, giving that feedback. We are also talking about creating an R&D consortium so that we can drive some of these fundamental research right from here. And then third, to have an ecosystem where we are not just doing design or only manufacturing independently, but we are doing design-led manufacturing or design-led product creation, and finally a value addition into the India ecosystem. So that's the charter for us ahead in the decade, and then all of us are part of it.
Excellent, and best of luck to the two of you, because I know you're charting that course. And thank you so much for joining us here at Studios today.
Sure. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Shri.
much.
Thank you for this conversation, and thank you so much for watching and being such a patient viewer. Now it's clear that India is on its way to becoming a giant in the semiconductor industry, partly because of the infrastructure that's being provided, the government support, the fact that we are going from supporting the semiconductor industry to now becoming huge consumers of it. And that question about when are we going to start manufacturing has already been answered, and those fabs are already coming up very soon. So we'll keep an eye on that, and to keep abreast of the latest that's happening in the GCC world, remember to stay tuned to the GCC Giants. Thank you.